Hey everyone, welcome back to another great episode of The Human Role. So as you all know, last episode you saw lovely Mariah Hantis. She was here dropping some knowledge on AI, but I wanted to just have her give some more insight on the global payroll side of things and really talk about, is one system enough? So we're just going to drop a couple little nuggets for you all. Mariah, I wanted you to maybe this time kind of define the challenge, right, when it comes to global payroll and like consolidation and what that really means to companies today.
Whew, how much time do we have? Yeah, global payroll consolidation. It's a hot topic and it's complicated. In the global environment, I think especially in the context of starting in the US, right? So you're a US employer and you're expanding globally and you have, now employees throughout various different countries. There's a lot of questions to ask. Are you employing these employees directly? So do you need a provider that can process your payroll, right? But you're employing and doing the HR aspect of these employees on your own? Or are you engaging with an EOR, an employer of record, who's managing end-to-end that? And where are those employees housed? And where's their data being entered and collected and managed? Outside of that, too, once you expand into other countries and just different types of work, you're dealing not only potentially with full-time employees, but you're dealing with contractors as well. And I give this context to say that global payroll by definition is, of course, managing paying employees. But when you're expanding in a global market, you're entertaining a lot of various different methods of work, types of workers, and where is all of that data being aggregated? So really what global payroll consolidation means to me is who is managing all of the data that is coming through all of the countries, all of the worker types that you have. And is that in one system, right? Does consolidation mean consolidating one system and one platform, or does consolidation mean consolidating it somewhere else in like a dashboard and through analytics? Because we can get into it later, we'll need more than one system to effectively manage that type of workforce.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Stephen Rothberg.
And I'm Jeanette Leeds.
And together, we're the co-hosts of the High Volume Hiring Podcast.
Are you involved in hiring dozens or even hundreds of employees a year? If so, you know that the typical sourcing tools, tactics, and strategies, they just don't scale.
Yeah. Our bi-weekly podcast features news, tips, case studies, and interviews with the world's leading experts about the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to high volume hiring.
Make sure to subscribe today.
Let's get into that now. So I'm curious on can one system truly handle all the complexities that go into like a W-2 employee, a contractor, the US, Canada, Mexico? There's lots of different layers, when it comes to payroll and the different laws. And at least from my experience, your experience may be different. It is hard for one system to have that platform. If they do, you're having to purchase other things. And so, I guess in your opinion, especially with your strong global background, have you seen a system be able to handle all one? And is it true, maybe you can't say that or not, but is it truly that, a system can actually handle all and be a, end all be all for a company?
Okay, it can, but not well. I'd say that if you're a baker, let's just say, you're in the kitchen, right? And you can bake up a good cake. That doesn't mean you can cook breakfast well. And that doesn't mean that you can make a good dinner. And, your sandwich skills for lunch might be off. You can do it because you have the tools, you have the space, but you're not necessarily executing it as well as someone who specializes in a good sandwich and someone who specializes in giving you that great dinner. That might be a very silly, poor analogy, but that is how I think about it in my mind, is that payroll systems, right? There are plenty that can do it all, and check all of the boxes, and you can get all of that data in there and layer in an HRIS and on top of that, and boom, you're done. Except maybe they don't do, Canada well, and maybe they don't manage contractors well, then you're sacrificing quality of process, which is sacrificing the experience of the worker on the end, right? Because at the end of the day, we can testify that we'll go through anything as professional, payroll professionals. It is what it is. Not all systems are perfect. We've been through it, seen it all. That's fine. But at the end of the day, that experience that really matters Is the worker on the receiving end? Are they able to get paid on time? Is the information that we're trying to share with them transparent enough for them? Are they getting payments on time, accurately? And if they're not, is that a result of the product just becoming too big or not efficient in all of the things that they can say they can do? So I believe that there can be a consolidation of systems. Like maybe you have a few things in one system and a few things in other, but really what you want to look for is something that can connect all of the lines seamlessly. And if you can have like some agnostic system that can connect all of these lines, where someone who does US payroll really well, or maybe America's payroll really well. So you have all of America's looped into one system, and then you have, Europe and APAC and different systems, because they just vary. The requirements vary so much that if you just find people who are good at that, the most critical underlying function is, how are all of these systems talking to each other? Because the reality is, somewhere or someone across the business is looking for data. They are going to say, who all works for us? Where are they located? How much are we paying them? And it becomes payroll's job or someone's job that trying to aggregate all of this data. And it's, I need to pull this report from this system, and this system isn't aligned to this system. You want to find a function that, if you're going to operate in different systems and go the path of, I'm going to work with people who specialize in the various processes by country or by the different worker types that we're working with, what system are you using to aggregate that data, and make sure that that works well with APIs, integrations, to spit out dashboards and data that your team can seamlessly use. Because I think that becomes the biggest flaw, is that in one side, you can have a do-it-all system. Maybe it doesn't do it all well, but all your data is in one system. So it's easy, right? In that sense. Then you have 15 different systems where they're operating flawlessly in 15 different ways, but they don't all talk to each other. And that becomes a business risk, because you just don't know what's all happening in those 15 different systems. There's no one looking across all 15 of those. So you want to make sure, at least, rather than global payroll consolidation, is that there is global data aggregation in whatever you're choosing to use.
Yeah. So gonna go all the way back to your explanation of like being a good cook versus a baker and so forth. I have never thought of it that way, but it is very true. I was just thinking as you were saying that, like if you could barbecue chicken really good in your backyard, that doesn't necessarily mean you could work at a 5-star restaurant and be able to do it in the tiny little nice plate or whatever,
Yeah.
Of course, there's always a unicorn, right? So no one get offended, but it's like, but like naturally you typically don't see those two cross and pass. So that's a great analogy to think of. And then I think you've already explained it, as I wanted to kind of get into what the potential drivers would be for a company to consolidate and get into one system. I think it's pretty standard, right? So to your mention, C-suite executives just want to see the analytics. What's the turnover rate? How many of the population pulling different departments? And when it's in different systems, it's really hard to get that data all in one. Accounting's job or CFO job, they may need to track the turnover percentages and so forth over different divisions. And it can be very difficult if things are in different systems, right? For people to just be able to get straight data. And again, as we talked about in our last episode, that puts on a lot of pressure for your payroll person who's already busy with all the millions of things that are going on. So I feel like that could also be a really heavy factor, would you say? It's just really just making sure analytics are together, reporting is seamless. I know it is hard for platforms to really consolidate US from Canada, from Apex. I think that's always a little difficult. But have you seen any other drivers that would really kind of stand out outside of more of like the analytics space, maybe to make it easier for the payroll person's shoulders and not have to get into multiple systems that we talked about last episode? But just kind of curious if you've seen anything else out there throughout your experience.
Yeah, for sure. Streamlining workflows, that's a big one, because if you want to operate a lean payroll team, let's just say, and have one payroll manager sitting across 5 different countries you're processing payroll for, if you're using like local softwares who are just like built for processing that country specific payroll, isn't even going to be in the language that payroll manager understands. So you have to be mindful of that as well, that if that's the route you choose, you may need if you're, let's just say, in the Netherlands and you want to use a Netherlands specific payroll software, to process payroll because you trust that the best, for your workforce, that's probably going to be in Dutch. And does your, US payroll person understand Dutch? Now they're out there and that's possible, but you want to make sure you're mindful of that because you can go through, again, this goes back to our last episode when we were talking about payroll professionals need a seat at the table when we're choosing payroll platforms, because can you imagine implementing a software to only find out that the payroll person doesn't know the language of the software? I'm sure that's happened before.
Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, I think as long as the business is aligned to those various things, right? Like that, if we want to go the local route, we may need 2 or 3 payroll managers to process in these very local specific platforms. Whereas if we use one system, to aggregate payroll, and it might not be perfect, we can have one person manage it because, it's going to be in one language, it's going to be one process and so forth. But I would say that the key driver would be that, what does your payroll workforce and strategy and goals look like for that payroll team? And then what is the way in which you're going to aggregate that data? Because whether it's in one system or 10 systems, there needs to be a data aggregation model in place. And what are you using to do that? And do you have the capabilities internally to do it straight from the systems into, a dashboard that is built? Or do you need to layer another tool on top of that to aggregate all that data from the various systems? And that's important because all of these decisions cost additional money and you want to make sure it's transparent.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, and how much money would it even cost to continue the recruitment process of trying to get someone in the US that covers different languages that actually wants to do the job? That's a whole thing. Again, another episode for another day.
We're going to have a residency, me and you.
Good luck with that, you guys. Hire someone to make sure that's appropriate. I mean, yeah, there's just so many different layers. Definitely not a click of a button type of job. You guys, is one system enough? Absolutely. But like all systems, not without some type of faults, right? And so you really need to evaluate the systems in detail to make sure it covers the grounds. And when we say in detail, even down to the language that most people don't think to ask at times, to really just make sure it will be suitable for your company and for your environment. Maybe make a list beforehand of what your requirements are, what your specific needs are. Talk to all of the appropriate people so that no one is left out, because you don't want to get halfway through an implementation or a go live and then find out that something critical is missing, because that is not good. And it happens all the time, unfortunately. All right, Mariah, thank you again for joining us for this great special edition.
Thank you.
Always great having you. And we will, of course, we'll see you. I'll nag you in a couple of months too to see what you're
I'm here for it. Looking forward to it.
Yes. Okay, great. All right, guys. We'll be back in a couple of weeks for another great episode. Thank you all so much. Talk soon. Bye.
Bye.